Welcome once again to Hadrian's Wall, and today we'll be looking at the bathhouse at Chester's Roman fort. The bathhouse was discovered during digging a drain from the fort in 1884 by John Clayton's men. It's Clayton we have to thank for buying up great sections of the wall and preserving it for future generations. Although the bathhouse has suffered stone robbing down the centuries because it was built onto the slope, soil collapse has covered most of the bathhouse, meaning it's in an excellent state of preservation. It was excavated throughout the final years of the 19th century by Clayton's men. The bathhouse sits to the east of the fort of Salernum on Hadrian's Wall, built sometime after AD 122. The bathhouse sits on the side of the North Tyne, and the bridge here carrying Hadrian's Wall and the roadway carrying the military road shadowed the bathhouse just to the north. The regimental bathhouse was built at the same time as the fort and was a simple design to start with, but was adjusted many times. The latest archaeological surveys have indicated it was altered at least 8 times in its life before finally going out of use in the 5th century. This architectural drawing by Kate Wilson gives us a real impression of what the bathhouse probably looked like at its heyday in the late 2nd century. The original changing room to the bathhouse was in wood, but in the mid-2nd century it was replaced by this stone lobby and exercise hall. And this is where the bather would have first entered the bathhouse. 7 alcoves, originally lined with wood with shelves, would have held the bather's clothes. This early sketch shows what the bathhouse looked like just after excavation. You can see the floor is a lot higher, and the excavators removed this to inspect the lower surfaces. The top of the niches are actually reused window heads which came from towers in the fort itself and then recycled in the bathhouse. If you visit the changing rooms, look down and you'll see a small slot in the ground. This gives the original depth of the changing room bench, and you can also see an original bench leg. After possibly playing some dice or exercising, the bather would then turn into the corridor and then move to the left into the frigidarium, which also had a wash basin where they would clean themselves down before entering the rest of the building. Fragments of the basin were found during excavation. Also, we have to imagine the wall being brightly painted and plastered. Although robbed away, there was also a cold plunge on this site here in the frigidarium or cold room. After our bather had taken a cold plunge in the bath, they would have moved on through a now disappeared doorway into a room where they would have been anointed with olive oil. As with a modern Turkish bath, the bather would have moved through a series of rooms with increasing temperatures. The remains of this room is the tepidarium or warm room. It's important to note that the hypocaust system with its raised floor has long since gone, meaning the modern visitor is well below what the Roman floor would have been. Once suitably heated up, the bather would have moved through this doorway and entered the coldarium or steam room. A series of stokeholes, probably fed by slaves constantly with wood, would have heated up this section of the bathhouse you can see beneath us. It's very likely the bathers wore bath clogs in this room to stop their feet burning on the incredibly hot floor surface. Examples of these have been found during excavation at Vindolanda Roman fort. In the coldarium, this was the hottest place you could be, the hot bath. You can still see the cross underneath, which would have allowed air to flow underneath the bath from the furnace outside. Bearing in mind there was no chlorination in the Roman period, so this must have been a real human soup of germs. Moving around the alcove on the west side of the coldarium, this held a niche, probably with a large basin similar to this one in Herculaneum. A large copper or lead tank would have been heated to provide hot water for it. Once again you can see the voids under the raised floor where the hot air would have circulated under the floor around the basin. It's here that the dirt and oil would have been scraped off using a strigil, possibly by a slave. The bathhouse would have been lit by oil lamps, but also plenty of natural light. In the apse you can still see the hole where a large window would have been with its splayed sill. Glass was found here during excavations. On the east wall of the frigidarium you can see the sill from a doorway which would have enabled the bather to move between rooms. See if you can spot the phallus carved into one of the stones. This would have never been seen by the bathers as the raised floor would have been above it. Reused Roman archstones now takes the modern visitor back into the lobby the same way the bathers in the Roman period would have done. Before you leave the Coldarium, it's worth just looking around the walls. You can see various features of the adapted bathhouse. They now blocked up door, which would have eased congestion and allowed the bather to move straight from the anointing room straight into the Coldarium. You can also see a displaced section of stone drain with its lead ceiling still in place. A later addition to the bathhouse was this laconicum or dry steam room. You can still see a replica raised floor still in place. Finally, the bather would return to the cold room to wash off and then head to the changing rooms to collect their belongings. Looking at the outer walls of the bathhouse, which would have been covered with plaster at one time, you can still see the putlog holes for construction. In the corner of the bathhouse you can also see the remains of the roof vaulting. This was made of a very lightweight stone called tufa. Outside against the west wall was a stokehole. This became redundant and then a bread oven was built over the top of it. Many alterations within the bathhouse have left little dating evidence. While you're perusing the west wall of the bathhouse, take a look up and you'll see a blocked up window which would have let light into the laconicum. The laconicum, or dry room, had its own stokehole which you can still see if you're coming down the steps to visit the bathhouse today. Once would have been a wooden lean-to structure here to keep the feeder of the stokehole and the wood to go in there dry. Last but not least, we come to the latrines. These were probably built around the Antonine period, so the mid-2nd century AD. It's possible there were wooden structures before this. You can see the substantial remains of the latrine building and foundations. Large interconnected stone drain sections poured water down from the frigidarium to flush the toilet. You'll note the Roman latrines are built very robustly. This wasn't just down to the Roman diet, this was due to the North Tyne constantly flooding, and any lesser building would have simply been washed away, hence the amazingly strong foundations and buttresses. Possibly at the end of the Roman period, the building was extensively robbed for building materials, probably for other buildings in the fort. Excavators found the bodies of 33 people, 2 horses and a dog buried around the outside of the bathhouse, finally sealing its fate. Well, thanks, you've made it to the very end. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and follow. I also take private tours along Hadrian's Wall to various sites, so please drop me a line if you're interested. Thank you.